So I'm going to start as the old white guy here, who has experienced a life of privilege, and I would like to get your feedback on has starting without that privilege affected your career and how? And I'll start with you, Ian.
That's an interesting question. Has starting without that privilege affected my career and how? So I didn't expect that question, but on the spot, starting without that privilege has affected my life. And I guess the way I would put it is, going back to the early days of my life, I've always had to work very, very hard in order to accomplish anything I wanted to accomplish. And I don't feel a grudge, or I don't feel like I'm a victim, but I've also always had an ethos of working, knowing that I have to work. And the world has changed a lot. So, I was born in 1969. I don't think my children face the same challenges that I faced. At least that's my hopeful aspiration. But certainly for a person, a black man born in 1969 and moving through the world of academia and then into the professional world, the 100-hour work week has always been my friend. And I guess I've always understood that no matter what, I can always work, quite frankly, I've always known I can work harder than the next guy. And knowing that I could always work harder than the next guy and having the discipline to do that day after day and year after year has made a big difference.
Okay, how about you, Beth?
Yeah, I grew up in Oklahoma, and girls were really expected to go on one track. And when I was deciding between schools, I had advice: if you want your MRS degree, go to this school. If you want a career, go to American University, which is why I came out to the East Coast. And similar to Nigel, I would say the perseverance for hard work, because I feel like as a woman, and as a woman who is extroverted and I like to smile and I might come off as like not as much substance, you're underestimated quite often. And fortunately, I have a love of learning, and I feel like that was really key to my success in the early tech phase, because I would just learn as the technology was getting to the next stage and evolving, and helping translate that to clients as we tried to sell new solutions they never bought before. And it was really my performance that defined me. So I would say there was a silver lining, though, to being a woman in tech. There weren't as many of us, and I was the only woman in my first startup for quite some time. And it comes with some advantages. In a crowded room, you can go talk to almost any guy you want to if you're trying to make a new connection and network. But it also comes with another edge you have to be careful of. So just self-management and hard work is, I think, how I overcame any kind of bias.
How about you, DP?
It is an interesting question. First, I want to thank Tien for inviting me to the panel, and the rest of the others. Beth and I haven't seen each other for like 15 years or something like that, so that's another story. I think all white guys get a bad rap. That's the first thing, Glenn, so I don't think it's a bad thing.
Some of us earn it.
So I won't touch that. I think the way I grew up, look, I grew up in India, sort of working class family. My biggest influence was my mom. My mom was a PhD, was a working mom. She had two boys. And I think if you've got any friends who grew up in India, or even first generation Indian kids in the US, when you have two boys, there was sort of two options. You could be an engineer or a doctor. So I became an engineer. Guess what my brother is? He's a cardiologist in Cincinnati. So it was sort of a predetermined course that you got your engineering degree, not because you wanted to be an engineer. It's sort of like, first you got your engineering degree, and then they laid out the options of what do you want to be in life, because you had this fallback option was the engineering degree. So it devalues it, but I think that's how I grew up. I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. It sort of, I moved to the US in '87, went to school in Cincinnati. For me, probably the formative influence is not so much, a race or anything specific like that. It's really exposure to the world at large. I grew up in India. I moved to the US. I went to school in the Midwest. Then I moved to Newport Beach. Orange County is another world, so I spent some time there. Then I moved to Bethesda, and then I spent 3 years in Hong Kong. Traveled and worked for McKinsey in Hong Kong. So I think the ability to just see different parts of the world, different cultures, So I always looked at it as it's not so much that A is better than B or worse than B, it's just different. It doesn't necessarily mean it's better, it's just it's different. And the more exposure you get to different races, cultures, languages, business models, people, it's amazing how much you learn from it. My mom was a teacher. She taught zoology. And the one thing even when she ran the university and then she was head of the department, she always taught freshman biology. And she told me the reason she did it was she learned more from the first year biology students about life and what was going on in the world than she did anything else. So she always said, like, make sure you keep in touch with different kinds of people. And she didn't lecture me on it, it's just something I picked up, so.
Interesting point. So, Nigel, as you know, David Trone spoke about somebody who started on third base.
Yes.
You're somebody who started in the dugout, stole first base, stole second base, stole third base. And what I mean by that is, your resume is very impressive. Harvard, Stanford, Goldman Sachs, Carlyle Group. We're talking gold-plated resume. Why would you leave that to start a Koolspan? Oh, and Marine Corps officer, which I'm sure forged a lot of your leadership.
Yeah, so interesting question. So I guess, you know, kind of woven in there, something else David Trone alluded to, which is that it's really important in your development to challenge yourself and to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. And I think it's been in my DNA for a long time that's, for whatever reason, that's what I've done. So I can tell you, resume notwithstanding, being a fresh Harvard grad on the tarmac at Quantico at Officer Candidate School is not the most comfortable place to be. And that's probably an understatement. And I look back on my time in the Marine Corps, and particularly my time making it into First Force Reconnaissance Company, as kind of emblematic of the challenges I've always sought in my career and my professional experience. You know, when I went into the Marine Corps, I couldn't swim. And by the time I got out of the Marine Corps, I was a Navy combatant diver. And really that, more than my academic success, and what I learned in the Marine Corps in terms of perseverance and leadership and commitment, is really what's driven me and what's been more thematic for me going across the different stages of my career.
Interesting. You know, as a panel, you folks have grit. You've had to overcome things which created grit, which is what makes great entrepreneurs. I think we do our children a disservice because we shelter them from these forging, you know, self-forging moments. We don't put them in the crucible, we shelter them from it. You have a very interesting startup life. You were in the dot bomb and the bombiest dot bomb in DC. You're what we all rail about as fake stuff. Tell us a little bit about working at E-Tensity. Was it E-Tense?
It was E-Tense. I had no idea when I took that job. I was number 16 on the team before we ran up to 400 plus people in the first 18 months and blew through 30 million probably in the process. This was my second startup. I had joined my cousin in his basement after Anderson Consulting and had been selling custom internet commerce solutions for about 2 years before I joined eTensity in '99. And coming in, it was to give you some kind of frame of reference. I had the Anderson World, which was like the HBR anthology of best practices in management. And then I jumped into a John Grisham novel, like The Firm. And you get there, and there's great parties, and kegerator, and ping pong on the veranda of the rooftop in Tyson's Corner. And the CEO had his private plane, and you could go on boondoggles, deep sea fishing in North Carolina, or the notorious beach condo beach week that, thank God, I'd already booked a trip to Belize and couldn't join that week. I probably would have run away and quit. there was the Hollywood Hills house because we were cultivating business in
Aspen,
LA.
right?
Aspen, the office in Germany with no real basis for business in Germany other than there were investors we were courting over there. We started to see a lot of questionable judgments being made around. We were still delivering, there were some of us still really delivering good solutions, but there's a lot of noise. And I think one of the best stories that came to mind recently, because a lot of this was really blocked away, preparing for this panel.
It comes out when you see your shrink.
Bloody exactly. I'd already processed a lot of this. So now, one day, one of my I had a good trusted group of guys there, and one comes into my office, and before I can greet him, he shushes me at the door. And so I'm looking at Brian, and he comes in, points to the ceiling, grabs a notebook on my desk, and writes a note, shoves it back in front of me, and it says, "Your office is bugged."
So for those who don't know, Etensity raised $30 million, went out of business with $13 million of assets, which is pretty good for a startup. It had $90 million worth of liabilities. And Peter Noce owned, he bought a condo on the Outer Banks. He had that nice fishing boat that was a couple $100,000. He let the company use it, but really it was his. It was a company asset.
They were all his toys.
He had the condo in Aspen, and it was an amazing thing. And what a burn.
Oh, absolutely. It was a case study in how to do everything wrong with the money that you raised from investors. But there were a few good things they did. Their first spree, all humility aside, they hired really good talent. They invested a lot in trying to have unique culture to attract the talent. So some of those things I've kept with me. But
$400 a month car payment.
Yes, I did have a nice
your
car.
First house.
Yes, I'm so impressed. You know all this.
Learning experience.
Yes.
DP, now you have gone from the startup that you ran, probably managing cash well, probably doing things differently because you don't have to report every quarter, to being at a public company now.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about that transition.
Yeah, so I sold mPortal to Broadsoft, which is a public company locally, almost 2 years ago. It'll be 2 years in June. Couple of things. One, I think this is something people confuse when you run a private company is you don't have a boss. A lot of people say like, oh, how does it feel like to have a boss? Look, I had investors at a venture fund in Zurich that I raised money from. So you have a boss no matter where you go or what you do. And I think to Beth's point, the minute you take somebody else's money, whether you think they're not the boss or they don't tell you they're not the boss, you raise money. I think there's a guy, Chip Hassett, he's a venture fund partner in Boston. He says the rule, you know what the golden rule of dealing with investors is? He says, he who has the gold makes the rules. So if you raise capital, you have a boss. So I think, running mPortal, we didn't have quarterly numbers, we have monthly board meetings. I'd go to Zurich twice a year, present. And interestingly, it was a publicly traded fund that invested in early stage tech investments in the US. So it was almost like a public company. You had reporting, we had financials, we had auditors. So that was one piece of it. What I love about Broadsoft is, Broadsoft's local company out of Gaithersburg started 17 years ago. Mike Tesler, Scott Halfpower, still there, founders of the company. And to your point on cash, they run it like a startup. It is still very much, there is no fancy digs and cool perks or anything like that. If you need to invest in the business, if you need to do something that has a legitimate ROI, I think the company backs you. The DNA of my team, we're not going to do the boondoggle offsite. We very much, so that's helped. And I think the cultures fit because it's not as if I went to some $50 billion company, but I think the public part of it, we just finished our quarter, so it was literally last week, is slightly different because there's immense pressure on the quarterly stuff. But look, when the way we run our business unit is very much as a standalone P&L, so to speak. So you're looking at your revenues, you're looking at your expenses. I don't look at cash flow, and I don't look at cash flow statements anymore because you're part of a larger company. But if you ever take your eyes off the economic side of running a business, whether it's a business unit, you're a product manager, it never pans out.
Do you see yourself managing for the stock price or for long-term growth?
Well, I'm not the CEO, so I don't want to comment about, but I'll give you my take on, I think as a company, we're focused on what is the long-term vision of the company. I mean, Broadsoft wants to be a global cloud communications provider. So we're very much about how do we drive global solutions. So we're a global company, 500 plus customers, 22 countries. So it's global, it's cloud-based. So we're really riding the wave of how businesses are moving to the cloud. And then it's really around communications and collaborations and engagement. So we have products that allow you to do communications over the web, so voice over IP. We have products that allow you to do collaboration, team collaboration, file sharing, again from the cloud. And then the third piece of our business is sort of omni-channel contact centers in the cloud. That's the focus. I've not run a public company, but every public company CEO I've talked to has made it very clear that you don't manage the stock price, you manage your business. The stock goes up $2, it goes down $2. You can't really say why it went up $2. For the same reason you can't do two. There is pressure, you've got investors, but I think we run our business. I mean, I talk to anybody in our company, I think there's a incredible focus on the fundamentals of the business, where the market's going. We're in a very competitive space. We compete with large players like Microsoft and Cisco. Sure. So I think that's how we run the place.
So Nigel, with that resume, all those places you've been, you must have many people who have taught you who to be and who not to be, how to show up at work and how not to show up at work.
Absolutely.
Most memorable, the person that you model yourself off of?
Yeah, so I think, going back, I became CEO of Koolspan 2+ years ago. And the reality is I never actually raised my hand and said I want to be CEO of Koolspan. That's the truth. I was working at primarily a venture capital firm. I came on board as a part-time CFO, ended up taking over operations about 6 months later, and then to make a long story short, my predecessor had some personal reasons he needed to leave, and I ended up sitting there one day in the office with him making the recommendation to the board that I become the CEO, and I had the keys. And that was quite a moment. I'll never forget it. And so, quite frankly, even though I had spent a year at the company in finance and operations management, I had a steep learning curve in terms of setting up a strategic framework and prioritizing and just running the company and ending up actually being the lead salesperson and business development person at the same time. And so really, and that was without a doubt the biggest challenge of my career thus far. And I've been very fortunate that within that period, I've had a mentor. I've had, it's a person on our advisory board that's got a lot of senior executive experience, particularly in the mobility space. And he's got a lot of software development experience. I had to learn how to manage a software development team. He's got a lot of product management experience, had to learn that too. So he's been fantastic. Is really an honest broker and someone who can take me in a room, close the door, and give me really honest feedback and coaching. And I think that that's been integral to my personal success at Koolspan and frankly to the success of the company.
Great. That's an interesting comment when you consider Marine Corps officers that you've served with, professors at Harvard and Stanford, that it goes back to this person so late in your career.
Absolutely. Well, I would say, the Marine Corps is a lot of things. Close-up mentoring is not necessarily part of the paradigm when you're a junior lieutenant.
Is that why you shied away from the can of whoop-ass?
Exactly.
So Beth,
Yes.
how about you? Now, you've been before you started your startup career, you were in a buttoned-up top consulting firm. Mm-hmm. Did you learn most from the great companies you worked for or from the worst?
The worst.
Okay, and what did you learn?
I would say really the study of people was more valuable in the startup world where there were fewer rules and you really saw how people operate in an organic environment and how culture develops and how they say the fish stinks from the head and how you can really see where leadership, the tone, the rules that are set, spoken or unspoken. And Anderson did seem very controlled, and we had 6 weeks of training before we could go on site with a client, et cetera. And in the startup world, you're just thrown in. And the company that I run now, I mean, we've doubled it more than doubled it in the past 6 years that I've been running it. So I've had a lot of growth in bringing people on, and how do I be intentional about the culture? And really blending a bit from the Anderson Consulting, now Accenture world, and the startup world. I've been very clear in making posters about what our principles are and things that you would expect in terms of quality and excellence, but things that you might not expect that I think really reflect me and my senior management team, which is honesty and collaboration in all that we do, and act with supportive kindness, because I want to be very intentional about the environment that people are coming to work and that they want to be there. And just one other thing I would add that continues to imbue me with ideas and stimulate a conversation among my leadership team is just continuing to read. And Adam Grant out of Wharton has been publishing quite a bit on psychological safety. And I really feel out of the environments where I didn't feel as safe in the startups, that I'm really being intentional about the kind of environment we create. And that is really, Grant's opinion or thesis is that's the source of true creativity, is the feeling of safety.
It's interesting because I'm a big believer that we lead unintentionally too often, in which case we get the culture we tolerate and deserve, not the culture we want to drive to. That's great. DP, you've gone from actually, was it McKinsey before? So you've been in the top consulting arm. You've gone to a pure startup where you had to keep the lights on and worry about it, to a public company. Where did you pick up your best lessons? Who was your best mentor? Or
It's a long list. I mean, you learn every day.
you can only pick one.
I don't know if I pick one person. I mean, if I were to pick one person, I'd go back to my parents, and from my childhood, I think how you're raised is a key factor. I think that's what I would pick. But if I were to talk of a formative experience, it probably was more, sort of I worked at Cincinnati Bell, then I moved to CSC. I was in the US. I always thought I'd be a corporate person. I thought I was doing well, ran product management at Cincinnati Bell. I was recruited away into CSC to run their international billing group. So I was here in Bethesda, Maryland, and this is sort of late 96, 99, that time frame. Lots of deregulation globally, so I did a plan for, Asia was a hot market and CSC should move into it. Wrote it up, the CSC was, the pitch to the CEO, and I said we should do this. They said great, and then pretty much something along the lines of, well, Asian guy, you should go to Asia. And I said, it's not that simple, we should do this. But there was this opportunity to go to Hong Kong and start a business from scratch with no rules and nothing defined. The cool thing was I stayed, this is the startup inside the big company, I stayed for 4 months. I lived at the Hong Kong Marriott, and I met the CEO recently, and I told him, I said, it's my coolest experience. But it wasn't the Marriott and the hipster lifestyle I was leading, it was more, you go out, you start a company, but it's not really a startup. You get somebody at corporate who you call back home at night and you get it. But it was such a formative thing because you realize when you start an office, there's no backup. There's no crying home to mommy or daddy. Everything. You're a hire person, you have to go. You have to open the door. You got to get them in. You got to recruit. You got to convince them to join. There is no CSC. You're Hong Kong. You're the office. So everything was entrepreneurial. Like if the printer broke, I'd get out, walk. I don't know, where do you buy a printer in Hong Kong? And you did everything. So I think the formative experience was just jumping into the deep end of the pool. That I think was the learning experience, because before that, like Beth talked about, when you work in large organizations, there's a plan, there's another business plan, there's a 3-year plan, there's projections, all of that other stuff. But my favorite quote about business plans and entrepreneurship actually is Mike Tyson said this. He said, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the mouth. That's what starting a business is. All the planning, you need a plan. I think you need a directional plan, but till you jump in and you do it, that is the ultimate learning experience. At least for me, that's how it worked out.
Great. Nigel, you sell this thing, you're cashed out, you're flush. Do you learn to golf? Do You buy an island? What do you
no,
do?
it would. I think that would drive me crazy. I think actually, to be honest, I would try to go out and find another company that was in a hole that needed to be turned around and put on the right track, and either dive right in as a CEO or some other leadership position, or maybe help an investor to do that with the company. I'd love to find another one.
Okay.
Absolutely.
We should talk later. I'd advise against it. Beth, same question.
Oh boy. I have a product I've been noodling for 3 years that I actually have my husband, who left his job at Georgetown Prep High School, and he's working at home on our product development. So if suddenly I was cashed out of Palladian, I'd go pursue this other dream with him.
Okay. Just curious, would you do it here?
Here? Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I love this region.
So DP, are you handcuffed or are you free?
No, I'm free. I mean, look, it sounds like a Connie line or a setup line. I love Broadsoft. I mean, I think it goes to the team, right? I keep coming back to, it's got an entrepreneurial culture. In some ways, they let me do what I did before as a person running a business. On the other side, it's a global platform. I had taken mPortal to where we could. We were profitable, we were growing, but it was the next stage. It's like, how do you take this on a global scale with much larger customers? So that's what I got to. So it's not like I think I did the startup thing, I'm doing the corporate thing, but I've done it before. As long as I enjoy it, I'm going to do it. If there was something I want to do in the future, I'd like to teach. It's one of those things, maybe because my mom was a teacher, was sort of an influence on me. And then I think, just to comment on your region question to Beth, I think the DC region gets this bad rap because for a variety of reasons. But I think if you look at it, because we think, oh, it's all government people, it's all defense contractors. DC has such a vibrant startup community. This is why I have a lot of respect for people like Tien who encourage it, who help it. I was living in Hong Kong. I left McKinsey, I moved back to the US, and then I went to the Valley. There were tons of offers from the Valley. It was 99, so I couldn't believe people would pay me that much to start a company, and I'd met with them 3 times, and they couldn't tell me what the company did, but they were like, well, we'd pay you more, we'd give you, what about an 183B exclusion? I was saying, like, can you tell me what the company does? Different culture, different environment, so I just sort of ran away back to DC, because I had sort of left from here. It's more real, right? You have people who are starting real businesses. That's the perfect example. The way you do a startup is your husband quits and starts the business at home. You don't raise $100 million and then buy a yacht and then have like a management offsite. Maybe you do, and maybe that's one way to do it, but 80-20, I think this region has a hotbed of entrepreneurship that does not get credit, right? People don't know. I mean, I love events like this. When Tina and I were talking about it, I said, like, man, I'd be honored to talk. Not so much that I have learned or to share. I just think we don't do a good job marketing entrepreneurship because there's this overhang of government and defense that, you do, like, so many great companies. Invincia, Anup just sold it. 100 million, and people are like, oh, it's 100. And I go, when did 100 million become like some passé number? So I think the region is awesome. So if I did start something else, I'd start it here. Partly because I live here, I love it, and I actually think even if I didn't live here, I think it's got the right environment for starting a company.
Your kids, would you recommend the startup life for them?
So it's interesting. So my youngest son is absolutely, he's enamored with what I do and with the idea of building a company from scratch. And so he's got that passion. So I think it depends on who your kids are. And if you know your kids and you've got a kid who's really who's self-reliant, a self-starter, has the imagination, and quite frankly has the stomach and the perseverance to hang in there and to keep going at it day after day after day, even when it may make sense to quit. And if you've got a kid like that who's got that fire in the belly, I would absolutely recommend it. But I think the biggest thing is, and this comes to me at least once a week, and used to be more often, is The most critical ingredient is really, and it's again going back to something I learned in the Marine Corps and has stayed with me, is never, you've got to have the sense, and Tien actually said this to me about 10 years ago, never quit. And I remember something Tien said it was in a different capacity, but he said, Nigel, just keep working. Just keep working. Just keep working and you'll be amazed what will happen. And if you've got a child, to answer your question, if you've got a child who's receptive to that type of philosophy, I would absolutely recommend it.
Same question.
Oh yeah, my oldest, she's ready to go. She already wants to start a YouTube channel, and I talked to her about metadata and digital safety and digital footprints and all, and she just turned 11. And I'm not ready for her to do that yet. She said the boy down the street, her classmate, only made 19 cents on his YouTube channel and his content stinks and she could do much better. So I love her spirit. So we keep talking about ideas. Shark Tank's our favorite show. We'll really dissect things and talk about the pitch. She loves to come up with pitches. She's got it. And so it's all a matter of, I mean, this company that my husband and I started, and he's really focusing on right now, we're going to get the kids really involved with it and be very matter of fact about the challenges and the realities of it all. And they already get it. Like, we're doing a bare bones spring break because we're putting money into the product. And so they're really getting their heads wrapped around it early.
So your husband was an educator.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe for your children, college will prepare them for life or entrepreneurship, which is
entrepreneurship. Even my husband will say, my husband is an academic, 2 master's degrees. He's a Renaissance guy, though. He was the varsity hockey coach and in the Hall of Fame at Prep. So he's this great athletic
my son played
academic.
hockey at Prep.
Oh, okay, we got to chat more right after this.
Till he flunked out.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. But my husband has often said, yeah, you've got to learn this stuff. I call him a Tiger Mom, because he's really drilling the kids on academics throughout the summer and everything. But he tells them, you've got to learn to be more like mom. You've got to learn to be able to talk to anyone. You've got to learn to be able to sell, because that's really, like, talking to people and getting things done is how you're going to succeed in life. So he's telling them to model me, which is pretty awesome.
Okay. DP, education for your kids.
I don't have kids, but I mean, one of the things, I don't know if Magnus is still here, we had Ryan, who's his son, when he was in high school. We have high school interns. And I was telling him just now, like, I actually like high school interns better than college interns, because high school interns know they don't know anything. College interns think they know it, and then when you graduate, you know it all. So it's sort of, so I love working with sort of high school interns, because they literally are like, what should I do? What should I say? How do I act? I think that's a very key thing. I think the big thing that I see, sort of as a learning experience, and I keep coming back to sort of looking around the world. I'm amazed now, you take like your daughter, and when you talk about starting a business, when you talk about entrepreneurship, it used to be before, you had the kid with the lemonade stand, and they compare. I live in the Hamlet in McLean, and there's kids there, and I always, even if I don't take the lemonade, I'll stop and buy it, because I'm encouraging entrepreneurship. But I just watch that and I go, kids today, if you're 11 years old, you're competing with a kid in China who's running a YouTube channel. And the kids know this. Nobody in the world anymore thinks that the competition is down the street, or, I remember a long time ago, Microsoft had a bug in Excel, and they posted it. A 10th grader in Bangladesh fixed the bug and posted the fix. So you watch, this was, 10, 15 years ago, and you watch this and you go, this is the big change when I look at the next generation of kids, or the way the world is growing up is you only competed with your high school, last night I was supposed to do the Georgetown business plan competition. No one's starting a business to compete in the DC area or even in the US. You start a business today, it's global, it's largely cloud-based. Talk about mobile, I started a mobile company. No one even thinks about anything else. So that lesson the kids are learning, I almost think they know it better, than I think, I hate to say it, the older generation, because they don't know any better. Like, your daughter is like, doesn't understand why you need cable TV, but you just watch everything on your laptop. So, my largest customers are Time Warner, Comcast, Charter. It's not a fun environment when, everybody, kids are completely different exposure, different environment. A partner at JP Morgan in London had I think a high school or a college intern and he had him write a 2-pager. And it's the best thing, it was several years ago. And this intern wrote a paper, basically said, I don't pay for TV, I pilfer all my music, I don't pay for videos, I do everything online, I don't understand what these movie theaters are. The only reason we'll go to a movie theater is if we all get on our mobile phones, text each other to meet at a spot, and then we'll go to a movie theater just to have fun. But I don't understand why movie theaters exist, cable companies exist, why you have to have music companies, why I can't buy music directly from, you know, and to his credit, the managing partner at JP Morgan sent it to all his media customers. So if you get a chance, if I have it, I'll send it. It is a perfect reason why if you talk to kids in high school, you know, whether Snapchat is worth 31 billion is a whole nother discussion, but if you know Snap, you know where the media industry is going. That's what I love about when you talk to kids and why high school interns are important is, you know, no high school interns faxing you his resume or her resume. And I had a realtor and they was like, oh, we'll fax you something. I was like, I don't need you as my realtor. It's not going to work. I mean, my wife was like, you're being harsh. And I said, okay, where are you going to get the fax? So I think that's the next generation thing. It's changed. I think sometimes we think we have to help children and teach them. I'm fairly certain your kid can teach you more about YouTube than you and I combined know. So it's my read of the next generation.
If you're going to pass a lesson to your children, something that you've learned through all your experience to be successful people, successful not just being, you know, to live a successful life, what would that be?
Always be cognizant of, well, to your point, what you don't know. Always be open to what's innovative, what's new, what's disruptive, what you need to learn, and be a better listener than a better talker. Think of more about listening and taking in information and processing the information and being thoughtful rather than thinking you need to always be the giver.
Same question.
Yeah, completely agree with you, Nigel. What I add is just your increased awareness of yourself, really knowing yourself and developing a sense of your authentic self and how people perceive you. One of my favorite nicknames at Etensity was AABB, which was given to me by a guy who observed me not getting involved in the shenanigans and being the top salesperson, and it was all about business, Beth. And I carried that forward with me, AABB. My mom was so proud, she sent me a little sign that like a teacher would have in her first grade, the capital A, capital B, little b, and she framed it. So I had it up in my office and people would always ask, what's that? And I said, I'm all about business, Beth. So I set the tone. You gotta set the tone, especially as women. I feel like you've gotta be aware of the image you're projecting, aware of people's motives, and really seeking to understand them so you can really master that personal dynamic with
So
anyone you
DP,
meet.
as a mentor, what would you pass on?
I think it's about, you know, Nigel said it, right? You got to stay in the game. People, I think we quit too easily or we take a downturn and think it's the end of the world. Like I said, I started my company in 2000. It is the worst. Beth and I met when the entire, I guess, e-world was exploding. Worst time to start a company. I raised my first round in March. I think the markets crashed like in June. I raised $2 million as my seed round. There was a company called Brians in California that competed with us. They raised $200 million in their Series A. Okay? 6 years later, Brians went bankrupt. We were still around. It's not that we were better. We just stayed in the game. We had 9/11, we had tech burst, we had financial crisis, we had, you know, everything, and we just said, just stay in the game. Because we fundamentally believed mobile was the future. So there was no, it wasn't like a if, then, it's mobile, I'm all in, we're going to win. So I think that was a huge part of just staying in the game. This is probably a bad analogy, but I'll give it, and I think Sandy on my team knows this. I'm actually a Patriots fan and a Brady fan.
It is a bad analogy.
And I know, but if you look at teams at halftime, the one thing I always come back to is, for some reason, coming back from halftime, the Patriots did not look flustered. There was no business not looking flustered. You're down 25 points. Their whole strategy was next play, first down, next play. They just stayed in the game. I don't think they played a great game. I don't think whether they deserve to win, if you're not a Patriots fan, you're a Patriots hater. So it's hard. So to me, I look at teams like that, and even last night I looked at Gonzaga, and I felt when a couple of plays, it was literally one play, right? So my takeaway when I talk to people is you don't know what's going to happen, right? I think we sort of look at everything and we say like, oh, the country's going to hell and all this other stuff. And I go like, you don't know. 4 years from now, when you look at presidencies, we don't know what's going to happen. So I think we just give up too easily. But I don't know when I'm going to die, but I'm going to live through 5 presidents or whatever it is. And I go, the game changes every 4 years, but we act as if everything has come to an end. And I go, so you fumble the ball, get the ball back. I don't have kids, so I'm allowed to say stuff like that to other people's kids.
So do we have some time to take questions from the audience? Audience questions? Yes.
One question. Nigel, what is Koolspan? What's your line of business? I can say when you play. What's the line of business? What is security?
So the question is, what does
Yes.
Koolspan do?
So we're in the mobile security industry. We're the leading provider of secure voice and messaging applications for mobile devices for Android and iPhones. And we're not a consumer application. We're focused on enterprise organizations and larger government organizations. We provide hosted infrastructure as a managed service, and we also deploy infrastructure for organizations that want to have maximum control over their data and their metadata.
So is that becoming important in mobile data security? Is that?
So, as it turns out, it's a great confluence right now of product that works with market that needs it. So we're doing very well.
Any other questions from the audience? Anything you guys think you'd like to add before we wrap up?
You and I had some commentary before about just any other advice for women getting into the space. So I do want to just plug that. I would say, in addition to mentors you can have either within a company or outside the company, there's some amazing, to your point about DC being a great region, great support for women. Mm-hmm. So 2 mentors right out there with Julie Cantor and Frederique Irwin, if you all know her, with hercorner.org. You can go to her website and click Seek a Mentor. I mean, there's just also great support, also in EO. I'm a member of YPO, just finding those kinds of people who don't have a dog in your fight and are willing to call out your blind spots or call your BS.
Very good.
Yeah.
I would just echo something we've said earlier. This is really a great area to start a company and to grow a company. There's an immense amount of resources. Thanks to Tien and others, the network is growing. There's really a tremendous opportunity here, both for adults and for kids interested in entrepreneurial endeavors. And so I just hope we can all continue to work together to continue to grow the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same thing. If you have an idea and you want to start something, I would say just start it, because you just don't know how the world works and how it plays out. People wait for the perfect moment and the perfect funding raise and the perfect everything. There is no such thing. You start it. The key takeaway, I think, for you is I've always been amazed when I started my company is how many people were willing to help. And all you need to do is just ask. And I think this is what's great about events like this in the region is, and I'll speak for the rest of the panelists, just ask if there's anything any of them can do or I can do. And if I can't, I'll say, hey, I have no idea what you're talking about and I'd add 0 value. And at least that way you know. So I think I would say start something and then just ask. There are so many people, especially people who've been through it, right? Who've been through it know, and they will at least tell you, even if they don't help you, they'll tell you, don't do X. That's worth, it's sort of like buying a business book. It's $20. I buy all kinds of business books and I go, all I need to get is one idea out of it for $20. So ask and start your business today.
Great, thank you guys so much. Let's give it up for our great panel, and we have some gifts for you all. I don't know if you guys have read Tim Ferriss's Tools of Titans.
Thank you.
Talk about one idea, you'll get 100 ideas in that book. It's a great book, so enjoy.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody for coming out. We have lots of networking going out in the hallway, so please head on out. And thank you guys for coming out. Appreciate it. Hope you guys can stick around and network a little bit with our crowd. But thank you guys very much.